All right, Dr. Acker back with you for part 2 of lecture 1. Last time we looked at the course materials and policies. I want to move on to look at some of the specific assignments. Each of the assignments, no matter how small, has specific instructions on Blackboard. And for the larger ones, I also have graded rubrics. So I'll show you how to find those in a few minutes. Let me go through kind of an overview of that, and I will show you how those work on Blackboard, where you return those in and find the instructions and everything. And in a future lecture, I'll actually show you how the feedback works so you know what to expect in that. And then we'll finish up by looking at some techniques for finding what to do with an assignment, go over the week 1 homework, and then I'll finish up with how to get an A in this course. We'll go back to PowerPoint here. There we go. So we have, surprise, surprise, a lot of writing to do this quarter. This is a writing intensive course because that's what it's here for. Over the next 9 weeks, you will do 2 major papers and a whole bunch of smaller papers to kind of warm you up and to contribute to those other projects. As we get to each of the major projects, I will go into more detail on the specific instructions and requirements and those, the basics. The assignment sheets are already up on Blackboard if you want to take a look at those. But I want to give you an overview of how that's going to work. Our first paper, the rough draft we do in about 2 weeks, so it's coming up pretty quickly, is on science and journalism. And this will require some outside research on your part. What I want to look at in this paper is how scientific evidence and scientific authority is used in journalism. It's kind of a public-facing genre to address some controversial issue. So I want you to look at what I would say is a relatively mainstream, relatively popular media sources. Pick one article. Make sure it's a news article, not an opinion article. And it could be from CNN, Fox News, Reuters, AP News, or BBC. And it should be about some sort of controversy. It doesn't have to necessarily be a scientific controversy, but it can be. I have a list on Blackboard of previous articles that other students have used in this course. You're welcome to start there and get a sense of how that might work. In the paper itself, you're going to analyze how the journalist presents the issue, what evidence he or she uses for each side, and how that author's rhetorical choices might influence readers. So you're going to want to find articles that are fairly complicated on issues where they have some sort of opinion. The rough draft for that is going to be about 3 pages. That's worth up to 50 points. That's going to be due April 22nd. For the final draft, you expand that to 1250 to 1500 words. Roughly 5 to 6 pages. That will be worth 150 points due May 5th. Talk more about that in a future lecture. The second major paper, which will take the place of our final exam, is a big one. This is worth 35% of your course grade. So instead of an exam, we're doing the paper. And it requires a lot of work ahead of time. So I want to put it on your radar screen now. For paper 2, you're going to read, summarize, and synthesize 5 recent academic articles published in the past 10 years related to your major or to the field you want to work in. So these do not have to be scientific articles. If you are a finance major or a music major or a theater major or, God forbid, an English major, you can find stuff about those fields, because I want this to be a way for you to understand your major or your career better. All 5 of these articles should explore a similar set of research questions. And we'll look at techniques for finding those a little bit later on this quarter, because you want to be familiar with how people have argued about those topics in your field, but you also want to be able to produce at least a proposal for a new project. And that's going to be the second key part of this project. After you finish summarizing and synthesizing the previous work, you're going to say, what can I do to contribute to this field? Because if you're thinking about graduate school, I know we have a couple of graduate students in the class, then you will need to produce new research. Say, here's a new way to approach this problem. Here's a new population to test this in. Here's a new model we could use to understand this. So I want to simulate that as you go. Because these are going to be specific to your majors and to your fields, I strongly recommend that you talk to professors in your fields. Maybe other classes you're taking this quarter or stuff you've taken in the past. This can be a really good way to prepare for a senior thesis. This can be a good way to prepare for maybe a technique you need to know more about, or just something that you think is going to be helpful coming up. So that will be our main thing at the end of the quarter. The rough draft for that is longer, be at least 1,500 words. To say 6 pages, again, 50 points. That will be due May 28th. And the final draft, that's our white whale, 2,500 words, 10 pages, roughly. That's due June 11th. That will be during finals week. The shorter papers, I divided these into several categories. We'll write 4 response papers. Those are about 2 pages each, 300 to 500 words, due on April 14th, April 28th, May 12th, and May 21st. Each one has a different specific topic, so those are laid out for you on Blackboard. But in each of them, you're going to have some sort of thesis claim. You'll defend that to respond to a specific part of the reading. Some of them may say, look at how this works, this technique works in particular, or maybe if there's one where you compare and contrast 2 essays, but you can take a look at Blackboard for those specific ones, and I'll be talking you through those as they get closer. We'll also write 3 self-evaluations this quarter, starting this week. So in week 1, your first one is due on April 9th, and then you write one at midterm, May 7th, and one at the end of the quarter on June 2nd. You will use these to first set up your personal writing goals for the class. Second, to evaluate your progress at midterm, how have you done so far? And third, to reflect on your writing development at the end of the quarter. These should be pretty easy to put together, but you do want to set aside time to think about those and draft them. Then we have exercises. Those are designed to apply our reading intellectual material in some way. Most of them, I think, are 20 points or so. There are a couple, maybe 10, but they're not really high stakes assignments, but they're ways to practice what you've been learning. Those will be due on April 7th, April 16th, April 23rd, and May 14th. So mostly in the first part of the quarter there. We will also do several discussions and workshops this quarter. I mentioned the Zoom discussions earlier in the last video. On the 14th, 23rd, and 28th of April, as well as on May 7th and May 12th, we'll have discussions as a class by Zoom. That means during our regular class time, you will need to log in and launch that either on your phone or on your computer. In both cases, I recommend plugging in your device because Zoom can eat the battery up. And you need to participate some way in the discussion to earn credit, to prove that you were there. There is a text-based chat if you're more comfortable doing that. And of course, it'll work like a classroom. So I think there's actually a tool where you can raise your hand. I'm not sure if we'll need to use that, but you'll pull up, and if you want to use video chat, that's fine. If you just want to do voice chat, that's okay too. And say something to contribute to those conversations, because we will have 2 hours to go through and talk through some of those texts and some of those ideas. So you want to prepare something to say for those. The major papers, you will do peer workshops to start with. Those will be on April 21st for paper 1 and May 26th for paper 2. Those are run exclusively on Blackboard. So what you'll do, the links are already embedded on the site. You will first upload a draft, and I've given you on the assignment sheets for each paper a target word length for the workshop draft as well as for the rough draft. There's about a page difference typically. And after you upload that, you will go through and answer a set of questions for 2 of your classmates for each of those workshops. So it's a pretty straightforward activity, but it's helpful to get peer feedback early on before you turn in your rough draft. the way these are scheduled is you will have at least, I think on the first paper, you have about 24 hours between the time you have to complete the peer workshop and the time that your actual rough draft is due. So you have time to make some changes there. And on paper 2, I think it's 2 days. So there's some room to add material. After you turn the rough drafts in, you'll get my feedback, and I'll give you a preview of that in the next lecture to show you how it's going to look. And that will be a written feedback. We will also meet. Each student will meet individually with me via Zoom to kind of talk through that feedback. So I find that's a useful way to ask and answer questions, to explain, oh, here's what I mean by this kind of thing. And it saves us a lot of back and forth in terms of, well, what does this mean and how do you mean this? Unfortunately, all the feedback is typed, so you don't have to read my handwriting or try to read my handwriting. But I think this will be a good way to touch base on that, especially since we don't have the advantage of in-class meetings, so I can actually kind of see how people are doing there. The writing assignment attached to that will be a progress report. So that's short, it's about a page, but I want you to summarize the feedback you got from both sources, from your peers and from me, and what plans you have to revise your paper. So you will write those progress reports the same day that we do our individual meetings. Of course, we'll schedule those individually later on. And it's to your advantage then to do maybe a morning meeting, and then you'll have the rest of the day to work on your progress report. Or you can even start that ahead of time and say, here's what I got from my peers, you'll have my written feedback, and here's what I plan to do for those papers. So those are, you get 20 points for each of the workshops and 20 points for each of the progress reports. So there's a lot to do this quarter. And I realize it's a busy syllabus. As I mentioned, you will have homework twice a week. And so I want to start by giving you some tips on how to parse these assignments. I have read a lot of assignments as both a student and as a teacher. Every time I'm planning a new course, I look at sample syllabi from other instructors, I look at sample assignments, and sometimes I read them and I say, wow, I feel sorry for their students. Because a lot of them are really confusing, or just say, yeah, write some paper-like thing and I'll tell you if I like it or not. And I don't think that helps you guys, and I don't think it teaches you much about how to write the papers well. So I tend to write very specific materials, but there's always room for improving those. I want to encourage you then, as we start out this quarter, to read your assignments carefully and to figure out exactly what your instructor wants as best as you can before you start writing. Because, and I've been at this for 15 years, and I still will have students ask a question about, what exactly I'm supposed to be doing here, and my thought will be, oh, wow, I really should have clarified that better, I should have explained that better, or even just, I made a mistake in writing that. This is why it's helpful to ask those questions so I can make those improvements, even if it's just for the next set of students. So when you get a paper, when you get an assignment, first thing you want to do is read it carefully, even if it's for the very end of the quarter. So our research paper is due in June. Now, it may seem that June is an eternity away, especially days like these when you actually have to stay home all day and you can't fill your schedule with all the things you used to be doing. But it will sneak up on you. So I would take even just this week, before we actually start classes, go through all of the assignments on Blackboard. Not only put them in your calendar, but see what sort of things am I expected to do here? Are there skills I don't have yet? Are there resources and materials I don't have yet? When will I need which textbooks? What do I need to do to read stuff ahead of time? And if you're not sure about anything, email me, drop by office hours, send me a text message, and I'll do my best to clarify what's going on there. You also want to ask yourself a set of questions here. So The first question is about the deliverable. What do you actually need to turn in here? Sometimes there's background work. So in paper 1, your background work includes actually finding the article and reading it. You'll probably read multiple articles to find one that you like. But you're not actually turning that in. Likewise, as we'll talk about in the next lecture, pre-writing activities are really important. Making notes, making outlines. Generally, you don't turn that stuff in either, but it's really helpful to have. So knowing what needs to be in, and of course when, is a good first step. You also want to ask how this assignment connects to the work you've been doing and the work you will be doing. Maybe this is about a reading you just did. The response papers work that way in the syllabus. You will be reading a series of essays, and I'll ask you to say, all right, how does this connect to this other reading? Or for the exercises, what is the tone like here? Is this a professional way to express this idea? Sometimes this will be on a particular reading assignment. Sometimes it'll just be on a theme or an idea that we've been working with or putting together for the larger quarter. Once you have those two in place, you got to figure out what the actual data is. And that data may take many different forms. If you're in a chemistry lab, honestly, I don't know exactly how the chemistry labs are going to work online, but you might have to look up certain numbers. You might have to actually do an experiment and see how does this actually work. In a literature class, you probably got to read a story or a poem or a play or something like that. So you need to know where you can find this material. If it's not clear from the assignment sheet, email your professor and say, hey, what exactly am I supposed to read for this? Maybe you overlooked it, maybe the instructors overlooked it, maybe both. We have most of our readings in Science and Society, but I also have several online readings this quarter. Fourth, look at the length of format requirements. This will help you both in planning your time. I'll come back to this question next lecture as well as planning the scope of your analysis. Believe it or not, every time I give a research paper assignment, it doesn't seem to matter how high I make the word limit, somebody emails me and says, can I go over the maximum? And sometimes they want to go way over the maximum because they just get really excited, or they have a lot to talk about, or they're trying to analyze like an entire TV series instead of the one episode I told them to analyze. Knowing those limits will save you a lot of time and a lot of headache as you go through. And this is a useful skill anytime you have to do a writing assignment. I work a lot in my editing business with students who are applying for scholarships or for jobs. And you guys know, if you've done any sort of application materials, there's usually a personal essay and they want you to have it a certain length. Well, I was working with a client just a couple of weeks ago, and she was applying for a fellowship for this graduate program. And I noticed that the essay she turned in was really short. It was about 300 words. And she was having a kind of a hard time telling the story she wanted to tell in 300 words. And I did my best to help her tell it better, because that's what the developmental editing process does. But as I was going through that, I thought, there's a lot to cover here. I want to double check the requirements. And so I pulled up the website for the actual fellowship, and it said an essay of at least 300 words, not an essay of exactly 300 words. And so I got right back to the client and said, hey, you've got a lot more space. You can expand this if you want to. And she said, oh, thank God. Because she had more to say, but she thought I had to keep this under 300 words, just a simple oversight there. We were able to develop another page or so on that essay, made it way better because she had that space. She understood the requirements better. Many of the assignments you'll get will be due in stages. In this class, you'll write a rough draft and a final draft for your major papers. But you'll also kind of be writing smaller things that will sort of contribute to your skills and your understandings of certain topics. In a 105, 106 class, maybe you wrote your research paper in 3 or 4 stages. However that's set up, make sure you know how those go together. And again, going back to the first question, what's the deliverable? What do you need to turn in for each part of the assignment, and how do they relate to each other? It is useful just to get inside your instructor's head. It can be a little weird place in there because most of us are professional nerds. But if you can understand why that assignment is there, why do they give it to you, then you can figure out what sort of material are they looking for. Is this assignment here because they want you to show that you've really understood the material well? That you can summarize this book or this essay, this chapter, whatever it is? Is this here because they want you to apply something or extend something? Is this here because they want you to test a certain skill? So maybe it's not so much about the content, but it's about writing this argument, this kind of argument in this length. I had a professor in college, and I got kind of annoyed at her because this was in a literature survey course. So we read a lot of books, and she gave us a series of response papers instead of having a longer paper towards midterm. The trouble was that the books kept getting longer and the response papers kept getting shorter. So that by the time we got to the end of the semester, we read Ralph Ellison's novel, Invisible Man, which is a wonderful novel. It's about 600 pages long. I loved it. And I had to write 1 page on it. And by that time, we had been studying books like this for 15 weeks. And I had so much I wanted to say, and I had to cram it all into this little 1-page paper. And I emailed her and said, "Can you please give me another page to work with? I'm struggling here." And she's like, "Yeah, that's kind of the point. It's harder to write the shorter papers than to write the longer ones because you have to decide how you're going to limit your argument, how you're going to focus your argument." And I was still really annoyed, but I did learn a lot about writing the shorter papers there, so that when it came to the longer papers, to the term papers, to the 20-page papers, even to the dissertation, years later, I was able to say, I can focus my argument this way. And I wouldn't have known any of that if I hadn't emailed her and said, "What are you doing here? Why are you making us suffer in this particular way?" As you get this information, you want to start planning your work. And I'll say more about this in a few minutes, but it's helpful to set up a backwards calendar. You have on Blackboard the deadline for every single assignment. And those deadlines will probably stay consistent depending on how the grading goes. Sometimes I need to extend the final draft deadlines a little bit. But as best as you can, figure out what do I need to contribute, what do I need to turn in here and when, and what does that mean for the week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks previous to that? When am I going to do that work? Because that's going to be the single most important question to ask. I've been teaching writing for 15 years, and I've taught a lot of really smart, well-prepared, bright students. I love it. And I've taught a lot of students who struggled with writing, whether because they weren't confident in their work, or they're writing in a second or third or fourth language, or whether because it just wasn't something they'd ever done well. And the 2 things that best predicted student success in my classes were showing up, virtually in this case, and being good at project management. Because we have a lot of papers and a lot of assignments this quarter, and I'm sure they're not the only assignments you have to deal with. If you're able to stay on top of those, to ask the questions when you need to put in the work, then it doesn't matter as much whether you have a natural writing talent. Because I've had students who are talented, but honestly kind of lazy, and they ended up getting B's when they could have easily gotten A's. And I've had students who were less talented or less gifted in writing. They worked their butts off and they earned their A's. Those are much more satisfying to teach. Let me go over the week 1 homework, and we'll finish up with some tips for getting an A in this course. So for Tuesday, April 7th, by the end of the day, you need to complete the syllabus quiz on Blackboard. So you're going to want to go to lecture notes and assignments in week 1. And this is an open book quiz, but it has a 10-minute time limit. So you read the syllabus first, read it carefully, mark up stuff, highlight it, whatever you need to do there. The questions are all multiple choice, so you can grade instantly, but you will need to read them carefully and make sure you're giving the right information. I'll show you where that is in a minute. Thursday, April 9th, we'll complete self-evaluation number 1. This is about your goals for the quarter, and upload a Word document to the Blackboard folder, and I'll show you that mechanism as well. So here are the instructions. The essay is 250 to 500 words, and I want to know what you hope to accomplish this quarter. Answer these questions. First, which writing-related tasks or skills are you already most comfortable with? Maybe that's something you've done well in previous classes. And which ones do you want to improve? So kind of take a strengths and weaknesses inventory. What kinds of writing does your major or the career you want to go into emphasize? What do you expect to have to do? Based on what you've learned in these last couple of lectures, what parts of the course do you think will be easiest for you, which will be most difficult? And what's one thing about this course you're looking forward to, and why are you looking forward to that? So let me show you where you're going to turn those in. Switch over to Blackboard here and go to student view. Okay, so basically you just have to go through these links here under lecture notes and homework. Click through to week 1. You'll take the syllabus quiz here. I'm not going to click begin because it's going to throw things off here. Notice this is due April 7th, 11:59 p.m. And I would recommend doing it in one sitting. So set aside maybe 30, 35 minutes, look over the syllabus thoroughly, mark stuff down. If you have questions, ask those questions before you take the quiz, and then go ahead and start that. When you're ready to do the other one, self-evaluation 1, there is a button to write submission. I strongly recommend that you compose either in Microsoft Word or in Google Docs. Save the file. Save it as a Word document. You'll need to convert it if you use Google Docs, and then upload it here. So that just works like an email attachment. You're going to do browse my computer, and here we have all sorts of random. Look, there's me and my cat. But here, we'll put the syllabus file there, and you see it said attached here. If you attach the wrong one, just click do not attach and redo it here. If you have any comments, you put them there, and so just click submit there. And I don't know. Yeah, so then you can review the submission history. It'll preview it here, so you say, wait, that's the wrong file. No problem. I have set each of these drop boxes to allow you to submit at least 2 papers. So you can just do start new and say, sorry, this is the correct one, put in the comments here, and to the new file. So that will be for this week. Going back to PowerPoint here. Let me finish off with some tips for doing well in this course, because I'm assuming that everyone wants an A. So, first big thing, identify what your priorities are and understand how they interact with each other. NSCI 306 should not be your top priority in your life right now. I don't know your lives. I don't know you guys well enough to make that call. But it's probably something like your health or your family. But I use this word interact deliberately because it's one thing to list our priorities and to say, this is what's going to be most important to me. But I found that if we acknowledge how those work together, and if we acknowledge that there has to be some negotiations, some give and take, then it's a much healthier way to go about this. So let me show you how this works in my life. This is a picture of my wonderful, beautiful wife. And she is the love of my life. There's nothing I would not do for her. That's just how it is. That's my operating system. And so in a very significant sense, she is most important. That said, she and I both recognize that we each have other responsibilities. We both work for the university. We both have to fulfill responsibilities. We both have to do other things. And that prevents us from spending every minute of every day together, even when we're both sheltered in place and working in our respective offices. This is why I say interactive priorities. If you think of priorities as competing, then you're going to create conflict. You're going to say, well, you like your job better than you like me. Or are you playing that video game again? Or seriously, another meeting? I thought we were going to spend some time together. You may have had these arguments with other people in your life already. You may have, think back to like junior high. You have, well, you're not my best friend, but you're up in the top 5 somewhere. Well, why am I not number 2? Why am I number 3? Well, yeah, we move beyond that, hopefully. So instead of focusing on competition, I want you to acknowledge we have different goals. I have certain professional goals that are not directly related to my marriage, but they do fuel how I can improve. If I'm a better professor, if I'm a better teacher, then I'm going to get more work. I'm going to qualify for promotions, for more teaching assignments, for better wages. That's definitely going to help me be a better husband, be a better provider in that sense. There's also a way to honor the multiple commitments that we have. My wife calls her mom every single day. And I've learned that that's just going to be a part of our schedule. She's going to, her family lives back in Korea. And so she's going to call them and probably take an hour or so just talking with them, checking in, seeing how they're doing. And that's important to her, it's important to them. And so it's part of those multiple commitments that we have. In the same way that I have commitments for teaching and grading and editing that are going to take time away and take energy and attention away from other things. In a perfect world, we'd have infinite time, infinite energy. We don't have that. We're not playing the game in God mode, as it were. So showing how that interacts can help us negotiate among them and help us decide, okay, when do we need to set that time aside? So I mentioned in my last video that I answer emails Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's not because I don't get email on the weekends. I get lots of email on the weekends, and like most of you, I'm kind of glued to my devices. But it's because I've set that time aside. I know I have family commitments then, and that might be we have to do a Costco run. Oh boy, Costco on a Saturday. That's always fun, right? But it can just be, you know what, we need to rest and relax and spend time together. And that priority takes precedence there in a way that maybe at 2 p.m. on a Thursday, it doesn't, because we're in meetings or I'm grading papers or something like that. So think of it this way. Because you have those big priorities, rather than saying, this is important, but I'm going to do this other thing, or this is, I value your relationship, but I have to do that. I have to go to work now. That's a good way to be resentful about those priorities, about those different goals, those different commitments. Think the other way. Flip the script around. Say, this is important to me, so I'm going to do this. It is important to me to be a good provider for my household, so I'm going to work harder at my job. It's important to me to have energy for the weekend, so I'm going to get my grading done Monday to Friday. It can require a mental shift, but I found it's a lot healthier way to deal with all the things that are put demands on our time, rather than just having to say, okay, I have to do this now because this other thing isn't important. Because it's still important. You may have to make decisions this quarter to say, you know what, I would love to spend time with my family or my friends or my spouse, but I really have to work on this paper. And that shouldn't mean that the paper is more important than your family, your friends, or your spouse. It's not. It really isn't. But it may mean that you have to honor that extra commitment, honor those goals, and say, because this other thing's important, I'm going to work hard on this other part now. The second advice I would give you is to gather the resources you have and figure out the most effective way to use them. And it may not feel like it, but your time is a great resource here. You will never be less busy than you are right now in college. And I heard that in college. I thought, yeah, right. Have you seen my schedule? And then I got out of college at grad school and said, okay, maybe you have a point. And then I got out of grad school and started working full time. Said, oh, crap. They were right. You're going to be busy with different things. You're going to be working different hours, maybe more hours, maybe in different locations, certainly in different kinds of work. You have different family responsibilities. Maybe you are taking care of kids or siblings or parents or grandparents. In whatever situation you find yourself, you will have to use resources smartly to do that. And the classroom is no exception. So, as you come up with a new assignment, ask yourself, what do I already know here? What skills can I draw on? None of you are coming into this writing class with zero writing skills. You all have gotten into college, you all have graduated high school, and you all have taken some version of English 105 to 107, whether it was here or another college. Bring those skills to bear. Dust off those textbooks and those notes. Another part of that is using your schedule well. Today already, I bet you've had a 5 to 10 minute stretch of just doing nothing. I'm a big fan of doing nothing. It's very relaxing. Sometimes by doing nothing looks like just sitting on the couch and relaxing, closing my eyes, thinking of as little as possible. Sometimes it's playing a game on my phone or something like that. And it's my time to unwind. It's also week 1. When we get to week 6, 7, 8, you may have less time for nothing. So get used to putting small parts of your schedule to work for you, or it's going to run over you. Write down, what do I have to do today? What is my must accomplish list? What is my priority list for today? But also think, when do I have that 10 or 15 minutes to work? Some of the most dedicated students I've ever had the privilege of teaching are the ones who work on their projects every single day. And it might just mean I have 20 minutes to read through this essay or to polish these paragraphs. But that's 20 minutes more progress than you had last time. Think of other habits you've developed and think how easy it is to do 2 or 3 weeks in versus at the very beginning. My wife and I bought a treadmill about a week and a half ago. And, at one point in my life, I was pretty good about going to the gym 2 or 3 times a week, but the gyms are closed, all of them right now. I can't do that. And so I had to make myself, especially those first few days, say, okay, I'm going to take 20 minutes out of my day and I'm just going to go walk on the treadmill. Doesn't matter how much distance I cover or how fast I get or how difficult it is or how many even calories I burn. I'm going to put the 20 minutes in, because I knew from past experience, there was going to be a point where I would think, oh man, I worked out yesterday. I really don't want to do it today. And I hit that point yesterday. But you know what? I am tired. It's been a long week. Everyone's a little stressed out. And my knee hurts because I'm old and I really don't want to get to the treadmill. I walked into the garage anyway, and I started my Audible apps and listened to my book. And I walked slowly, but I walked for a couple of miles. And I felt better about myself at the end because I knew I could put that time aside, because otherwise I'd probably just be doing nothing, maybe feeling guilty about not doing my workout. As college students and as Cal State students, you have a big advantage. You have support networks. Sometimes there are people who are paid, quite literally, to help you. I am one of those people. You have an entire fleet of student affairs officers and student support services and tutors who are there to make your life easier. You also have people in your life, your personal life, who can help you with those tasks. Sometimes those are people who help you by saying, you know what, you need to put the books down just for an hour and we need to watch a couple episodes of The Office, or we need to go out for ice cream, or we need to just sit down and talk. Sometimes they help you by saying, you need to stop watching Netflix and eating ice cream and talking to your friends and get your butt in gear. And sometimes those are the same person. We call those people moms. Whatever that looks like for you, use them. Take advantage of them to help them reach your goals, whatever that looks like. When my brother was doing his master's program in chemistry at University of New Mexico, he would call me. He'd go to class, and on his drive home, about 45 minutes, he would call me and tell me about the problem sets he was working through and all the stuff to do in lab. And I would tell him, I am an English major. I have no idea what you're talking about. And he said, I know. And he still told me about the problem sets because it helped him to talk through them. And I did the same thing when I was writing my dissertation. I'd call my mom and I'd say, let me tell you about my chapter. She said, oh boy, because she was not an English major either. But I talked through what I was trying to do, and she would ask questions, and I'd have to think, oh, how would I explain this? And it helped me process, and helped my brother process, just what all the stuff we had to do. Find someone like that in your life. Talk to them. Lastly, I want you to stay engaged in your own learning. It is a requirement that every point has a cat meme, so there's ours. Be enthusiastic like this little kitty cat. Figure out the best way to manage your course projects, whether it's in this course or otherwise. One of the models I'm going to introduce you to in the next lecture is called SMART Goals. I'm going to link to it here. This is a way to organize the tasks you have to do and a way to do that consistently. I mentioned this earlier. Make sure that all the assignment deadlines, especially the big ones, are in your calendar. Blackboard will generate that for you if you ask it to. That's the easy part. The hard part is using those deadlines to work backwards and schedule the work sessions. Now, this quarter, you don't have to come to class in the traditional sense. So, you have 4 hours a week in your schedule you would not have otherwise. If you even put 2 of those hours to work for you, reading the homework, working on the essays, planning ahead, you will get so much work done. Lastly, as you get new information in the context of other stuff you know, how do you latch this on to something you covered in another class? How do you apply this to some skill that you have set up before? How do you say, this is how I want to learn and practice this? And it may be in some completely non-academic context. I learned a lot about Microsoft Excel because I had to organize data for a computer game I was playing. I was a little bit obsessed with the game. Okay, I was a lot obsessed with the game. And so I thought, I have to figure out some way to get this straight and to play the game better. Wait a minute, I can learn how to do this in a spreadsheet. And now I use that when I set up a grade book or something like that. There may not be a lot of connections between your hobbies or the stuff you enjoy and the majority of your classes. That's just kind of how education works. But I hope you will be able to find something even in this class that you like and find some way to make this work for you so you can advance not only your academic goals, but you can actually have a good time doing that. Next class, we're going to look at strategies for organizing and forming arguments. Meanwhile, if you have any questions about the course, or if you want to run ideas by me, maybe an early draft of some evaluation, then please send me an email. Till then, take care of yourself, stay healthy. I'll see you back here next class.